everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a very special guest joining us for an imagined conversation. For centuries, the wealth of a nation was measured by the gold it hoarded in its vaults, and the power of a king was seen as the primary engine of its economy. We believed that trade was a zero-sum game, a constant struggle for a limited pie, and that the only way to succeed was through rigid control, protectionist policies, and the careful guidance of the state. But what if the true source of a nation's wealth is not a king's treasury, but the collective ambition of its people? What if the simple act of self-interest, when allowed to flourish in a system of free exchange, could lead to a spontaneous order that benefits everyone? Our guest today is the man who first made this radical and enduring claim, a Scottish philosopher who saw in the hustle of the marketplace not chaos, but a hidden, guiding wisdom. Born in Kirkcaldy, Scotland in 1723, Adam Smith was a moral philosopher and political economist who is widely regarded as the father of modern economics. His early life was marked by a deep intellectual curiosity, which led him to study at the University of Glasgow and later at Oxford. Upon returning to Scotland, he became a professor at Glasgow, where he taught moral philosophy and formed a close intellectual bond with the philosopher David Hume. Smith's early work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, explored the role of empathy and sympathy in human behavior, a foundational idea that would later inform his economic thinking. However, it was his magnum opus, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, that would change the world. This book, released during the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, laid out the foundational principles of capitalism and free markets, challenging the prevailing mercantilist ideas of the time and establishing a new paradigm for how we understand prosperity. Welcome to a dialogue that takes us to the heart of economic thought. Our conversation today is a deep exploration of the principles laid out in a book that is arguably one of the most influential ever written, The Wealth of Nations. Our discussion will revolve around our guest's most famous and oft misunderstood concept, the invisible hand. We will delve into his argument that when individuals are free to pursue their own self-interest in a competitive market, they are led, as if by an unseen force, to promote the public good.
Mr. Smith, thank you for joining us. Let's begin with your most famous idea, the invisible hand. What exactly is this concept, and how does it work?
The invisible hand is a metaphor, a way of describing the unintended social benefits of an individual's self-interested actions. When a merchant, for example, seeks to increase his own profit, he must compete with other merchants. This competition drives him to be more efficient, to produce a better product, and to charge a fair price. In doing so, he provides a benefit to the entire society, even though that was not his primary intention.
So you are saying that rational self-interest is a virtue?
Not necessarily a virtue in the moral sense, but a powerful and constructive force in the economic sense. I argue that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. When each person acts to improve their own condition, it inadvertently leads to a more prosperous society for all.
This seems to suggest a very limited role for government. What then is the proper role of the state in your view?
The role of the government is not to command or control the economy, but to create the conditions for a free and prosperous one. I outline three essential duties. First, to protect society from violence and invasion. Second, to administer justice and protect the rights of its citizens. And third, to erect and maintain certain public works and institutions that no private individual would find profitable to undertake. Beyond that, the market should be left to its own devices.
You argue for a system of free trade. What is the benefit of allowing nations to trade freely with one another?
The benefit is specialization, or what I call the division of labor. When each nation is allowed to produce what it is best at and trade freely with others, it leads to a greater total output and a lower cost for everyone. A nation should not try to produce everything for itself. It is a foolish farmer who tries to make his own shoes. In the same way, a nation should specialize and trade.
You often used the example of the pin factory to explain the division of labor. Can you explain that for us?
In a pin factory, a single worker might not be able to make a single pin in a day. But when the process is broken down into 18 separate operations, one man drawing out the wire, another straightening it, and so on, 10 men working together can produce 48,000 pins in a day. The division of labor, therefore, leads to a massive increase in productivity, and this is the engine of a nation's wealth.
But what about the moral implications? Doesn't the pursuit of self-interest lead to greed and exploitation?
I addressed this in my earlier work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. I believe that humans have a natural capacity for empathy and sympathy. We are not purely selfish creatures. The invisible hand works within a moral framework where people are guided not just by profit, but by a sense of justice and fairness. Without a moral and legal framework, a market cannot function.
Let's discuss wages. How are the wages of laborers determined in a free market?
Wages are determined by the forces of supply and demand. If the demand for labor is high and the supply is low, wages will rise. If the demand for labor is low and the supply is high, wages will fall. This is a natural and self-regulating process. The competition among masters for good workers will drive wages up to a liberal level that allows them to live a decent life.
You were a strong critic of mercantilism, the prevailing economic philosophy of your time. What was your main criticism of it?
Mercantilism was a system of absurd and protectionist policies based on the fallacy that a nation's wealth was determined by the amount of gold in its treasury. This led to tariffs, monopolies, and colonial exploitation, all of which stifled trade and innovation. My argument was that the true wealth of a nation is not its gold, but its ability to produce goods and services, the prosperity of its people.
Mr. Smith, looking at the modern world, a world of global capitalism, multinational corporations, and deep economic inequality, what would you see as the greatest success of your ideas, and what would you see as their greatest challenge?
I would see the success in the unprecedented prosperity that the free market has brought to much of the world. The division of labor is now global, and billions have been lifted out of poverty. But I would also see a great challenge in the pursuit of self-interest without a moral compass. The invisible hand is a powerful mechanism, but it requires a just society to function. When unchecked greed and political corruption override the principles of justice and fairness, the invisible hand can become a tool for exploitation rather than a force for the common good.
Adam Smith's legacy is one of revolution. He was the first to articulate the idea that the spontaneous order of a free market, driven by the individual's pursuit of a better life, could lead to a more prosperous society for all. He reminds us that the true source of wealth is not in the hands of kings, but in the creativity and hard work of the people. While his ideas have been used to justify both great progress and great inequality, his core insight that the invisible hand of the market can be a force for good when guided by the principles of justice remains as powerful and relevant as ever. We thank Adam Smith for this powerful conversation. His ideas, born in another century, are more relevant now than ever before. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep thinking.